The day a father saw dignity die. I didn't know a father could feel his heart snap in half. Not crack, not ache. Snap, the kind of break that doesn't make a sound, but changes the shape of everything inside you forever. That moment came on a Tuesday afternoon, on the third floor of a glass and stone building in downtown Dallas. When I turned a corner I had no business turning and saw my son on his knees scrubbing a toilet like he was born to be someone else's lesson. The smell hit me first. Bleach, stagnant water. That sour, neglected odor that tells you this room only matters when someone powerful decides it does. It was the kind of bathroom nobody notices unless it's dirty, tucked away from the polished hallways meant for clients and executives. And there was Ethan, my son, on his knees, yellow rubber gloves pulled almost to his elbows, a stiff scrub brush clenched in his hand, his brand new suit jacket, navy blue, tailored, still smelling faintly of the store, hung neatly on a hook behind him, like a cruel reminder of who he was supposed to be today. His white dress shirt was damp with sweat. His shoulders were hunched forward, rounded in a way I had never seen before. He looked smaller, younger, like the world had reached down and physically pushed him into place. For a split second, my mind refused to accept what my eyes were seeing. This couldn't be real. This had to be some misunderstanding, some badly timed joke. But then I heard the laughter. Not friendly laughter. Not awkward laughter. Satisfied laughter. Standing in the doorway behind him was Warren Hargrove. Silver hair, perfectly combed, a suit that probably cost more than my first truck, a watch that caught the fluorescent light every time he moved his wrist. He leaned casually against the doorframe, one polished shoe crossed over the other, like this was entertainment he had paid for. Two executives stood nearby, arms folded, smirking like boys watching something they knew was wrong but enjoyed anyway. "That's the only job this idiot knows how to do," Warren said, shaking his head with a grin. "Business degree and still can't scrub a toilet right." They laughed again. And then, like the universe wanted to make sure I never forgot this moment, I saw Lauren, my son's wife. She stood off to the side, arms crossed tightly against her chest. She wasn't laughing, but she wasn't stopping it either. Ethan looked up. Our eyes met. His face flushed deep red, not with anger but with shame. His eyes were wet, wide, desperate. His lips moved, barely forming words. "Please." Or maybe, "Don't." Something inside my chest gave way. Not loudly, not violently, cleanly, like a beam snapping under too much weight. That morning had started so differently. I had woken up early, the way I always did, out of habit more than necessity. Retirement had given me time, but it hadn't taken away routine. I brewed coffee, the cheap kind I liked, and stood in my small kitchen, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator. Ethan had come over early, already dressed for work. He stood at my counter adjusting his tie, his reflection caught in the microwave door. The tie was expensive. I knew because Lauren had mentioned the price twice when she bought it. "Guess I'm corporate now," he joked, smiling a little too fast. I slid a plate of eggs and toast toward him. Same chipped plate I'd been using for years. Same chipped mug filled with coffee. "You earned this," I told him. "You didn't marry your way in." He nodded. But I saw it, the doubt tucked into the corners of his face. Ethan had always been brilliant. Straight-A student, quiet worker, the kind of kid teachers described as gifted but humble. But he carried something heavy too, the fear that brilliance alone wouldn't be enough in rooms full of money and last names that mattered. He had married into wealth, and no matter how much Lauren said that didn't matter, Ethan always felt it did. When he left, I watched him walk to his car and felt that familiar mix of pride and worry only parents understand. You raise them to stand on their own, and then you spend the rest of your life hoping the world doesn't knock them down too hard. Around lunchtime, a strange pressure settled in my chest. Not pain, just weight. The kind that makes you pause mid-step and ask yourself why you suddenly feel uneasy for no clear reason. I told myself I was being ridiculous. Still, I packed sandwiches into a brown paper bag, the way I used to when Ethan was in school, and drove downtown. Just a quick hello, I thought. A father's surprise. The receptionist's smile froze the moment I said his name, and that was when I knew. Before I stepped into the elevator, before I turned that corner, something had already gone terribly wrong. If you're listening to this right now, drop a comment. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there? I want to know how far this story about a father and dignity has traveled. Sometimes the quietest warning signs are the loudest ones. The lobby of Hargrove Construction Group was all glass and stone, polished floors, high ceilings. The kind of place designed to make ordinary people feel temporary. I walked in wearing work boots and a denim jacket, my hands still rough from decades of contracting work. I wasn't ashamed of that. I had built my life with these hands, houses that stood through storms, families that slept safely under roofs I'd repaired. But under those bright lights, I could feel the building trying to shrink me. The receptionist, young, kind-eyed, glanced at my lunch bag, then at my face. "I'm here to see my son," I said. "Ethan Caldwell. He started today." Her expression changed instantly. Not confusion, not surprise. Fear, mixed with pity. "Sir, maybe you should wait," she said softly. "Wait for what?" She reached for the phone, lowering her voice, but I was already walking past her toward the elevators. My boots echoed loudly on the marble floor, each step sounding out of place. In the elevator, my reflection stared back at me in the brushed metal walls. Gray in my beard, lines around my eyes. A man who had survived worse things than embarrassment. "Ethan is grown," I told myself. "He doesn't need rescuing." But no man deserves humiliation. Not on his first day. Not ever. And then I saw him, on his knees, and I understood this wasn't training. It was breaking. Humiliation is a system. I didn't step into that bathroom. That's the part people misunderstand when they hear this story later. They expect rage. They expect shouting. They expect a father to explode. But rage is loud. And loud men get escorted out by security. I stood just outside the doorway, where none of them noticed me yet, and I watched. I watched my son scrub porcelain like it was his destiny. I watched Warren Hargrove talk down to him the way men talk to animals they think exist for discipline. I watched the executives enjoy it not because they hated Ethan, but because humiliation makes weak people feel temporarily powerful. And worst of all, I watched Lauren. She didn't smile. She didn't laugh. But she also didn't move. She stood there with her arms crossed, jaw tight, eyes flicking occasionally toward her father as if checking whether this had gone far enough. Like this was uncomfortable, sure, but necessary. That hurt more than Warren's words. Because cruelty from an enemy is predictable. Cruelty tolerated by family is something else entirely. Ethan scrubbed harder. I could see it in his arms, the way his muscles tightened, the way he leaned into the work, like maybe if he did it well enough this would end sooner. Like perfection could protect him. That was when I stepped forward. "Ethan." My voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The sound of my voice alone made him flinch. He turned his head slowly, like he was afraid of what he'd see. When he saw me, his face changed in a way I will never forget. Relief, shame, fear, all of it, stacked on top of each other. "Dad," he whispered. Warren turned, irritation flashing across his face like I'd interrupted something important. "Well, well," he said. "You must be the father." "I am," I replied. Warren smiled the way men smile when they believe they have leverage. "Your son is learning humility. Valuable lesson." He gestured toward the toilet like it was a whiteboard. "Ethan," I said, keeping my voice calm, "stand up." Warren's smile disappeared instantly. "He's on company time," Warren snapped. "He's not finished." The executive shifted, suddenly alert. This wasn't part of the show. Ethan's hands tightened around the brush. He didn't move. He looked at me, not pleading. Exactly. More like warning me not to make things worse. I swallowed hard. "We'll talk later," I told him gently. "At home?" Then I turned my eyes back to Warren. "You and I will talk too." Warren laughed, sharp and dismissive. "I'm a busy man. You'll make time," I said. I turned and walked away before my hands betrayed me. In the elevator, the doors closed with a soft metallic click that felt louder than anything else in that building. I pressed my palms against the cold wall and stared at the floor. Seeing your child humiliated doesn't make you violent. It makes you exact. Outside, the Texas sun hit my face. But I felt cold all the way through. I sat in my truck for a long time without turning the key. Then I pulled out my phone and dialed the one man I trusted to turn anger into numbers. "Frank," I said when he answered. "It's Daniel Caldwell. I need you." Frank Martinez was a forensic accountant. We'd met years ago after a storm ripped through his neighborhood. I rebuilt part of his house when his insurance company dragged its feet. I charged him fair. I showed up on time. I did the job right. That buys more loyalty than money ever will. "What's going on?" he asked. "You don't call like this." I told him everything. The gloves, the toilet, The laughter. Frank didn't interrupt. When I finished, he exhaled slowly. You want me to look into Hargrove Construction Group, he said. I want everything, I replied. Debt, loans, lawsuits, quiet partners. Anything they don't put on their website. How deep? As deep as it goes. There was a pause. Give me 24 hours for a preliminary scan, he said. When I hung up, I didn't feel better. I felt focused. That night, Ethan came home late. He moved through the house like a ghost. Shoes by the door. Jacket hung carefully. Hands washed too long at the sink. He smelled like disinfectant. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at the wood grain like it might explain something. I'm sorry you saw that, he said quietly. No, I replied. You don't apologize for being abused. He swallowed hard. They call it humility training, he said. 6 weeks. Warren says if I prove myself, I'll get a real role. And Lauren? I asked. She says it's temporary, he replied. That it's good for me. Good for me. I looked at my son, the same boy who used to cry when he thought he disappointed his teachers, and saw how carefully he was trying to convince himself this pain had a purpose. Can you hold on a little longer? I asked. And trust me, he hesitated. Then he nodded. Before we continue, ask yourself this, and drop it in the comments if you're listening. Would you have walked out that day? Or stayed to prove your worth? I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee I never drank, staring at old photographs. Ethan in his graduation cap. Susan holding him as a baby. Our small house before I fixed the roof. Susan used to say, a parent's job is to make sure their child never doubts they deserve respect. And someone had just taught my son the opposite. At 6:58 a.m., my phone buzzed. Frank, I ran the numbers, he said. Daniel, you're going to want to sit down. I already was. Hargrove Construction is bleeding, he continued. Bad developments, over-leveraged properties, a balloon payment due in under 90 days. How bad? 12 to 15 million in exposure. If they miss that payment, the bank takes control. I closed my eyes. What would it take to buy controlling interest? I asked. Frank paused. That's not a casual question. I didn't ask casually. 7 to 9 million, he said finally. You'd need to move fast. Quiet. I looked around my modest kitchen. Same table, same mug. Then I thought about something I'd never told Ethan. I didn't just save money. I invested. Carefully. Patiently. Quietly. Frank, I said, I can do it. Silence. Then, if you do this, it changes your life. Money grows back, I replied. Dignity doesn't. The slow erasure. Humiliation doesn't always arrive like a punch. Sometimes it comes as a routine. By the second week, Ethan stopped calling it strange. He called it how things work there. That was the part that scared me most. Every morning, he left the house earlier than he needed to. Not because he was eager, but because arriving early meant fewer eyes watching him. He learned which hallways to avoid, which bathrooms were his responsibility, which executives liked their coffee black, and which ones liked to remind him they didn't know his name. Warren never raised his voice. He didn't have to. He would walk past Ethan while he was cleaning and pause just long enough to say, You missed a spot, even when the porcelain shone like glass. Then he'd walk away without looking back, confident that Ethan would start over. Again and again. By the third week, it wasn't just toilets. Ethan carried boxes, delivered files, stood by doors holding them open, while men in suits talked past him like he was part of the furniture. During meetings, he wasn't invited to sit. He stood at the back of the room, hands folded, listening to conversations he'd studied years to be part of. Once, a junior executive tried to thank him. Warren shut that down fast. He's here to learn humility, he said, not to be praised. Laughter followed. Always laughter. Ethan told me these things in pieces, short phone calls, half sentences, like saying too much might make it heavier. I'm fine, he kept insisting, but he stopped smiling. He stopped joking. He started apologizing for things that weren't his fault. Lauren noticed. Of course she did. But noticing isn't the same as caring. At home, she became distant. Not cruel, worse. Efficient. She talked about schedules and social events like nothing had changed. When Ethan tried to explain how it felt, she'd sigh and say things like, Dad went through worse. You're taking it too personally. This is how powerful people test loyalty. Test loyalty. She didn't say, my father. She said powerful people. That told me everything. One night, Ethan asked her quietly, does it bother you? She didn't answer right away. Then she said, I just don't want you to ruin this. Ruin this, not ruin us. While my son was being erased inch by inch, I moved in silence. I sold 2 rental properties I'd owned for over a decade, properties I'd planned to pass down someday. I didn't hesitate. Buildings can be rebuilt. People are harder. I liquidated stock positions I'd held since before Ethan was born. Watched numbers I'd nurtured for years disappear with a few clicks. I didn't feel reckless. I felt certain. Frank handled the paperwork with clinical calm. He formed an investment entity that didn't point back to me clean, quiet, professional. No red flags. No ego. He warned me more than once. Once this starts, he said, you can't undo it. I know, I replied, because this wasn't about winning. It was about ending something. The first sign that Warren felt pressure came late one Thursday night. Frank called. They're scrambling, he said. Delayed payments. Meetings with lenders that aren't going well. Does he know yet? I asked. No, Frank replied. But he feels it. Men like him always do. Good. Let him feel it. On Friday night, Ethan called me from his car. His voice sounded thin, stretched. Dad, he said, there's a big client meeting Monday. I waited. Warren wants me to serve coffee. There it was. The humiliation with an audience. I pictured it instantly, Ethan in a suit, walking around a table of executives like a waiter, while Warren introduced him as an example. Can you do it? I asked gently. A long pause. I think so, Ethan said. Lauren says it's almost over. Almost over. I clenched my jaw. You're stronger than you think, I told him. Just a little longer. He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for days. After we hung up, I stood in my kitchen and stared at Susan's photo on the wall. I'm about to spend everything we built, I whispered. She smiled back at me, frozen in time, like she always trusted I'd know when it mattered. I called Frank. Send the offer, I said. He hesitated. Tonight? Tonight, I repeated. I want him cornered before Monday. There was a long silence on the line. Then Frank said, all right, by morning he'll know a lifeline exists. I set my phone down and sat in the dark. For the first time since I'd walked into that bathroom, I felt something settle inside me. Not anger. Certainty. The day everything broke. The cruelest humiliation is never done in private. It's saved for an audience. Monday morning arrived heavy and gray. The kind of day that presses down on your shoulders before you even step outside. Ethan dressed slowly, carefully. He chose a clean shirt, straightened his tie. He didn't look in the mirror for long. Lauren checked her phone while he buttoned his jacket. Just get through today, she said. This meeting matters. Not you matter. The meeting. Ethan nodded and left without arguing. He'd learned that arguing only made things worse. The conference room on the executive floor was already full when Ethan arrived. Long polished table, leather chairs, men in tailored suits speaking in low, confident voices. Laptops open, bottled water placed perfectly at each seat. Warren stood at the head of the table, relaxed, in control. Coffee? He said without looking at Ethan. Ethan picked up the pot and began moving around the room, pouring carefully. He kept his eyes down, focused on not spilling, focused on breathing. This, Warren said loudly, grinning at the clients, is my son-in-law. A few polite smiles. Learning humility, Warren continued. Important lesson in this business. Some chuckles. Ethan felt his face burn, but he kept moving. Then his hand shook, just slightly. The coffee pot tipped. Dark liquid spilled across the table, soaking papers, splashing onto a client's expensive suit. The room erupted. What the hell is wrong with you? Warren shouted. Ethan, Froza. Clean it up, Warren barked. Now. And just like that, my son was on his knees again, in front of everyone, wiping coffee off polished wood while men stood and watched. Someone laughed nervously. Someone else looked away. And then Lauren walked in. She took in the scene in seconds, Ethan on the floor, Warren furious. Clients uncomfortable. Her face tightened. Not with concern. With embarrassment. Ethan looked up at her, searching for something. Anything. Say something, he whispered. Not here, Lauren hissed. You're making this worse. That was the moment. The exact moment something inside Ethan finally shattered. He stood up slowly. The towel slipped from his hands and fell to the floor. "I quit," he said. Silence slammed the room. Warren stared at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. "You're joking," Warren said. "Sit down." "No," Ethan replied. His voice was steady now. "I'm done." Lauren grabbed his arm as he walked toward the door. "You're embarrassing me," she whispered fiercely. Ethan turned to her, his eyes clear for the first time in weeks. "You let him do this," he said. She snapped back without thinking. "You're weak, just like your father." The words landed like a slap. Ethan stepped back. Then he walked out. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. "Dad," Ethan said. His voice broke. "I quit." "Come home," I replied. "Now." "I failed," he whispered. "No," I said firmly. "You just chose yourself." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. When he arrived, he looked hollow, like something essential had been scooped out and left behind. I hugged him, and he didn't pull away. "I don't know who I am without this," he said quietly. "You're still you," I replied. That was never theirs to take. He sat on the couch, staring at nothing. "What happens now?" I looked at him, the boy I'd raised, the man he'd become, and made a decision. "Now," I said, "we end it." Across town, Warren Hargrove was pacing. The offer had arrived that afternoon in a thick overnight envelope. Red River Capital Partners. $8.4 million. 60% controlling interest. Short deadline. No games. Warren laughed when he first read it. Then his CFO didn't. "Sir," the CFO said quietly, "we need this." Warren's lawyer flipped through the documents, his expression tightening. "They're legitimate," he said. "And the timing is bad." Warren's wife, Evelyn, read over his shoulder. "Take it," she said sharply. "I'm not losing this house." Warren's jaw clenched. He hated being cornered. But for the first time in his life, he was. On Thursday morning, Warren walked into a private conference room at a luxury hotel believing he was negotiating. He wasn't. Frank laid out the numbers with calm precision. Debt, liens, missed payments. A countdown Warren couldn't stop. "This is my company," Warren insisted. "It was," Frank replied. "In 30 days, it belongs to the bank." Silence. Finally, Warren muttered, defeated. "Fine, but I want to meet the primary investor." Frank nodded and stood. He knocked on the connecting door. 3 clean knocks. And that's when I stepped into the room where power changed hands. Warren Hargrove had spent his entire life believing one thing: that power belonged to men who spoke the loudest, owned the tallest buildings, and never apologized. So when the connecting door opened and I stepped into the room, his mind simply refused to accept it. For a moment, he stared at me like I was a clerk who had wandered into the wrong meeting. Then recognition flickered, confusion, and finally fear. "You," Warren said slowly. "What is this?" I took the empty chair across from him and sat down. "This," I said calmly, "is the consequence of humiliating the wrong person." Frank remained standing behind me, silent. The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Warren's wife, Evelyn, went pale. "You can't be serious," Warren snapped. "You don't have this kind of money." I folded my hands on the table. "You confuse wealth with noise," I said. "Some of us work quietly." Frank slid the documents across the table. "Red River Capital Partners holds 60% controlling interest," he said evenly. "Effective upon signature." Warren didn't touch the papers. His jaw tightened. "This is extortion." "No," I replied. "This is a market transaction, one you desperately need." The lawyer cleared his throat. "Mr. Hargrove, the numbers are correct." Warren's hand trembled slightly as he finally reached for the pen. "Why?" he demanded. "Why would you do this?" I met his eyes. "Because you confused humiliation with leadership," I said. "And you taught my son that his dignity had a price." Warren scoffed weakly. "This is about a job?" "This is about a man," I corrected. "And what you did to him." Silence filled the room. Evelyn leaned forward. "Sign it," she whispered sharply. "Before you lose everything." Warren's pride fought one last time. "You think this makes you powerful?" he sneered. "You'll destroy the company." "No," I said. "I'll save it." He laughed bitterly. You're a nobody." I leaned closer. "I raised a good man," I said. "That's more than you can say." The pen scratched across paper. Once, twice. When he finished signing, Warren's shoulders sagged. as if gravity had finally caught up to him. The room felt different immediately. Quieter, lighter. Power doesn't leave loudly. It slips away. Effective immediately, Frank said, collecting the documents. All executive authority transfers to the board under Red River's direction. Warren stood up abruptly. This isn't over. I looked up at him. For you, I said. It is. That evening, Ethan sat across from me at the kitchen table, staring at the same chipped mug he'd grown up seeing every morning. He looked tired, but lighter. What happens now? He asked. I slid a folder across the table. He opened it. CEO appointment letter. He stared at it for a long time. Dad, I don't know if I can. You already can, I interrupted. You just never had the chance. He swallowed hard. Lauren called, he added quietly. I waited. She said she didn't mean it. I nodded once. And? I told her I needed time, he said. Then, after a pause, I don't think she understands what she let happen. I placed a hand on his shoulder. Some people only respect strength when it hurts them, I said. That's not love. Ethan nodded slowly. The next morning, the announcement went out. Cultural restructuring. Zero tolerance for abuse. Merit-based advancement. Employees whispered in hallways. Some were relieved. Some were terrified. Warren's name disappeared from the website by noon. By Friday, he was gone. Weeks passed. The company stabilized. Ethan worked harder than anyone by choice, not fear. He listened. He rebuilt trust. He learned when to speak and when to stay quiet. One night, he came home and said, I fired someone today. I looked up for humiliating a junior staffer, he added. Publicly. I smiled. Good, I said. That's how it starts. What dignity costs. Power doesn't vanish all at once. It leaks. At first, Warren Hargrove told himself this was temporary. That men like him didn't fall, they paused. He still had contacts. Still had favors owed. Still had his name. But names only matter when someone is willing to answer your call. Within weeks, his calls went to voicemail. His invitations were politely declined. The golf club where he used to hold court suddenly had membership reviews. The charities that once printed his name in bold quietly removed it from their programs. The world hadn't turned against him. It had simply stopped protecting him. Warren tried to fight it. He threatened lawsuits. He made speeches about betrayal and disloyalty. He told anyone who would listen that he'd been ambushed by opportunists. But there was a problem with that story. No one wanted to listen anymore. Ethan, meanwhile, learned something new every day. Not about business, about people. He learned how fear spreads through an organization, how cruelty becomes policy when no one interrupts it, how silence is often mistaken for loyalty. He also learned how quickly things change when someone finally says, this stops here. The first week as CEO, he called an all-hands meeting. No grandstanding, no speeches about dominance, just truth. I was humiliated here, he said plainly. Some of you saw it. Some of you laughed. Some of you stayed quiet. The room held its breath. That ends now, Ethan continued. If anyone here believes respect has to be earned through pain, this is not the place for you. A few people resigned within days. Most stayed. Relief looks a lot like loyalty when it finally arrives. Lauren didn't take the change as well. She showed up at the house one evening unannounced, standing stiffly in the doorway like she wasn't sure she belonged there anymore. I didn't think it would go this far, she said. Dad was just intense. Ethan listened without interrupting. You didn't stop it, he replied quietly. She scoffed. I didn't think I had to. That's the problem, Ethan said. You thought it was normal. She reached for his hand. He stepped back. I need space, he said. Not to punish you. To understand who I am without being told what I'm worth. Lauren left angry. She didn't cry until she was already in the car. Some realizations arrived too late to fix things. Months passed. The company grew steadier, smaller, healthier. One evening, Ethan came home late and dropped into the chair across from me at the kitchen table. Same table, same chipped mug, same quiet. I filed today, he said. I nodded. How do you feel? Sad, he admitted, but not small. That mattered. Warren moved out of the house. Evelyn insisted on keeping. Too many memories. Too many mirrors. He rented a quiet condo and spent his days watching financial news, telling himself he was still relevant. No one called. The silence he once inflicted now lived with him. On a Sunday morning, Ethan cooked breakfast. Burned the toast. Overcook the eggs. We laughed. Guess I'm not corporate anymore, he joked. You never were, I replied. You were just learning where not to belong. He smiled. A real one, the kind that reaches the eyes. Dad, he said, serious now, why didn't you stop it sooner? I thought about that. Because sometimes, I said slowly, saving someone doesn't mean pulling them out immediately. Sometimes it means giving them room to choose who they want to be when the moment comes. He nodded. I chose myself, he said. Yes, I replied. You did. 6 months later, we sat on the porch as the sun dipped low. I got an offer, Ethan said, from a firm in Austin, smaller, values-based. They want me to help build culture from day one. I raised an eyebrow. You don't have to leave. I know, he said, but I want to. I don't want my success tied to revenge. That told me everything. You'll do fine, I said. I learned from you, he replied. Before we close, if this story meant something to you, if you've ever been humiliated, overlooked, or made to feel small, take a second to like this video. Subscribe if you believe dignity matters more than titles. And leave a comment below telling me where you're watching from. I read them all, because here's the truth, no one teaches you early enough. Money can return, status can be rebuilt, but dignity once destroyed costs more than most people are willing to pay to get back. Love isn't passive. Real love fights, quietly, precisely, and without asking permission.